So basically, we're going to designate the region of interest for the motion detection alarm. Use the tools on the screen. On the left side, we have the tools that include the coloring of the different colored pencils. And down at the bottom, you have different sizes for those pencils. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to clear all by clicking on the clear all button. That simply frees up the screen for me. And then I'm going to select a color. And the color has no purpose other than to be able to be visually seen more effectively based on the camera you have selected. For example, I'm going to select the large size pencil drawing on a blue pencil, and I'm going to draw it here in the middle. And if I select the yellow color, the color obviously changes to yellow or red. And I think that red shows up a little bit better on the screen than yellow. And blue and red are relatively similar, but I'm going to stick to red. And that's the only color intrinsic value there is, in that you're able to see the video better, or rather your region of interest better on the video that you have selected. On the right side, we have buttons such as Clear All, Mark All, which simply enables me to mark the entire screen. And there's the Show Grid button. What the Show Grid does is it shows me a grid of where I'm able to select rectangles for my region of interest. And this just marks for me where a rectangle exists. I'm going to hide that, and I'm going to go and select my region of interest as being the area right over here. And again, I can choose different sized markers, and you can see the difference between the size of the markers is how exact you want to be in whatever area you're trying to select. Now, to select a large area, it's better to go with a larger size pencil, and then you can do much more at one time by simply dragging with your mouse, and wherever you click or drag, the area is highlighted. There is an eraser option as well. By clicking on the eraser and whatever size you want for the eraser, I'll choose right now a small size. And basically you can see what happens is that by clicking on a particular rectangle, I get rid of it, and that's how I can make it exactly a design that I want. In our particular case, I just want to erase what I did, and I'll simply bring the eraser over and drag it across, getting rid of larger areas that I have previously selected. Any questions on how to manipulate the markings of the region of interest? If not, we'll move on. At the right side, there's a minimum blocks section. The minimum number of blocks, basically this is a way of being able to either catch more action for my detection or less. In other words, when I have one number of blocks, that means any block in my region of interest, if any block changes, then I will be notified of the alarm. If I change the minimum blocks to, let's say, 5, that means that any 5 blocks have to change in order for me to be given the alarm notification. One way of looking at the number of blocks is basically the size of an object. For example, if I have, let me actually clear this, and let me make markings of what I would represent a person walking across the parking lot. If I wanted to catch people walking across the parking lot, then maybe my number of blocks would be 3, because 3 would represent more or less the changes of a person walking across this parking lot, as opposed to maybe a cat or a smaller object running across. And the idea would be that if I have it at 1, I might get an alarm from the cat as well as the person, and then I would get a false detection. But if I made it a higher number of blocks, then possibly I would only catch the person I want and not detect any smaller objects, or maybe a bird flying across. So that's kind of the idea of the minimum blocks. It's for minimizing detections or maximizing detections, again, depending on what it is you're trying to catch. Keep in mind that if you do not want to take a chance of missing an alarm, then you want to leave it at the 1, or you want to leave it at a smaller number rather than a higher number. Because the higher the number, then of course the more chances there are of missing a detection. Now, one last note on that: if I have several areas that are highlighted, this is all still one region of interest. It's simply that it's separated along the camera view. But if I have the minimum number of blocks is 3, for example, then a block in any of these areas and another block in any of the areas would constitute as the total number of blocks. So if I had one block here with motion, another block here with motion, and a third block on the top right with motion, that would meet the minimum number of blocks required, and I would get an alarm. And it might not be what I want if somebody's walking across. So again, that's where you want to keep in mind what your region of interest is and how many detections you want or you don't want to receive based on that. Any questions on that? All right, I'm going to go back and highlight this area over here. Keep in mind, if I highlighted the area by the branch, then the leaves moving would, if they caught up to the area region of interest, then movement in that area would trigger an alarm. So I want to keep that in mind as well in areas where there's constant motion or motion that every once in a while does cross the region of interest. I need to make sure I take that into account when dictating how I proceed onwards.
Sorry, what does the sensitivity meter do?
The sensitivity meter is meant as well for being able to be more sensitive to motion or less sensitive to motion. In other words, when motion is within my region of interest, do I want to be able to detect very slight motion or more specific hard motion, call it? The normal is the parameter. I always suggest to just leave things at the normal. If you needed to change any of that for whatever reason you have, then obviously if you go towards the lower sensitivity, it'll be less sensitive, and if you go to higher sensitivity, you'll have more sensitivity. So that maybe in this particular case with the leaves, I can make it less sensitive, and then maybe the leaf won't trigger the alarm. But on the other hand, I need to make sure that when somebody crosses the parking lot, that is what I'm looking for, and that I didn't make it less sensitive to the degree that it will not recognize what I need it to. And the same goes with the high sensitivity. It might recognize too many things where I really don't want it to recognize. So it's a meter of being able to play around with sensitivity to try to get more specific results for what you're looking for. Keep in mind that an outdoor camera is going to be more problematic than an indoor camera because of the elements. If it's raining, for example, I'm going to get alarms for the most part because of the outdoor camera. And for example, if the tree really swings over, then I would also get a detection on that as well. And an indoor camera, you're much less prone to getting external disruptions for your region of interest. If you think of a corridor, then somebody walking in the corridor, that's the only change there really is. So you want to keep that in mind as well. The sensitivity is, again, if you're getting too many results and you want to lower that and the number of blocks isn't, you don't want to go too high on the number of blocks, then sensitivity would be another way to be able to try to get that.